What I'm going to share is how this meeting come about. And because I know many people complaining about the air district, and both here and in Vallejo. And so the meeting come about because I'm a community advisory council, and so this November I went to the meeting in San Francisco. After the meeting, it's like already 10 o'clock or something, and so I went out of the meeting room, and in the lobby, I saw Mr. Viet Tran there, and we started a conversation. And he was out there because he's like directly report to Dr. Philip Feim, and he actually approached people in the lobby and talked with me. So I was kind of. I thought, wow, that's something new. So even more surprised, the next day I got an email from him and say he wanted to introduce me to the deputy executive officer and have an in-person meeting. I was so surprised. Like, that's never happened in the past. So I had a meeting, but then Mr. Tran said he wanted to actually come over to Vallejo. So the original plan is he will come over to Vallejo, but I thought, like, since he already spent his time driving and everything, come over here, he might as well, because the two cities are so close. That's one thing, but also we share the same kind of problem. So maybe we can give him an even better idea of this whole area, like including Crockett and Martinez. So the original plan is morning in Vallejo, and then 1 to 3 is Benicia, and then 3 to 5 is in Martinez. Unfortunately, there was a time conflict at Martinez with the mayor Briani. So we have to reschedule that. So today will be only these two.
Kathy Carriage I'm also with Constance with Airwatch Bay Area, but for this purposes today with the Benicia Community Air Monitoring Program and Good Neighbor Steering Committee, which we'll mention a little bit later.
Hello everyone, I'm Dylan Boofy. I'm the field technician for Argos Scientific in the Bay Area.
I'm Nick Spada from UC Davis Air Quality Research Center, and as an air monitoring professional, I really love this site and I can't wait to see all the goodies inside.
I'm Eric Stevenson. I also work for Argos. I also worked for the Bay Area Air Quality Management District.
I'm Constance Butel. I won't be filmed, obviously, giving my introduction, but Kathy and I and Marilyn and Nancy are the Good Neighbor Steering Committee that had a settlement with Valero that actually helped fund this whole thing, among many other things. And we've been working with Gwen Ottinger out of Drexel University and the Fairtech Collective on Airwatch and now Refinery Airwatch. And it's a lovely community. And I sit with Ken on the Communities for Environmental Justice Coalition, statewide organization.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, please.
I'm Viet Tran, Deputy Executive Officer of Public Affairs at the Air District. I oversee our government relations at the local, state, federal level. I also manage our communications department, which is our communications team, our public information officers, and then finally I manage our external affairs office and our special projects divisions. And just really quickly about myself, I'm from Southern California, grew up exactly 2 miles away from the Chevron refinery, and 13 miles away from the Torrance refinery, and 11 miles away from the Carson refinery. So I'm very familiar with the impacts of air pollution from the stationary sources. And I started my career 27 years ago working in government for the city of Los Angeles. I worked for a city councilwoman who fought the expansion of LA International Airport.
Wow.
So at the time, the city and the mayor, former mayor at the time, well then mayor, was working to expand LAX to accommodate bigger jumbo jets and create more air pollution to fly over the communities of which I grew up in. And so between the refineries and the airport jumbo jets, we were in this like trifecta, quadfecta really, of pollution. After that, I went to the private sector, was working in public affairs for Southern California Edison, So I worked in mainly distribution, and then later transmission, and then finally at San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station. And we were just talking about that. Elizabeth had
Great
shared.
surfing place. Used to
It is
be.
a great surfing spot.
Elizabeth and I were talking about that she was with Friends of the Earth, and at the time, when I worked for Edison, I worked very closely with Friends of the Earth, and you all may have heard by now that Edison chose to decommission that nuclear plant, and so it is no longer in operation. And then after that, I went to work in telecommunications for a few years, managing 21 states for Sprint and T-Mobile, and then I went back into the utilities world. You may have heard of Entergy New Orleans, and they made some international news because they went and hired paid actors to testify before the New Orleans City Council to support the creation of a gas power plant. And so the corporation fired and got rid of all the leadership there, including the CEO and all the different managers. And the new CEO came on board and brought me on to help rebuild the relationships with the communities in New Orleans. And so I was a director of public affairs for Entergy New Orleans for 3 years to help rebuild the trust that was lost by the previous leadership. And then last October, Dr. Philip Fine hired me here to the Air District. Many of you know Dr. Fine. And at the time that Dr. Fine came on board in February of last year, he asked the board to help him create a position of Deputy Executive Officer of Public Affairs. And so that is why I'm here. I fill that role. And you may have heard on Tuesday about a settlement, an agreement with Chevron and MRC. And, we're so pleased with the fact that, after all this time, they fought our landmark historic Rule 6.5, and here comes the Director Young, just in time. I was just talking about Rule 6.5. But so as you all know, Director Young and our board voted to hold Chevron and MRC accountable. They spent all this time fighting our landmark rule to reduce emissions by 70% at Chevron, 80% at MRC, and they finally gave up the fight because they knew that we could defend our landmark historic rule, the first in the nation to hold the refineries accountable and to reduce emissions at their FCCUs. And so, as you all know, we're very pleased that we announced on Tuesday that our board voted to approve the agreement to ensure that Chevron and MRC come into compliance, to pay $138 million in penalties, and to ensure these health protective rules stay in place. So we're very proud of that. Eric, I know you're very proud of that, and I know Director Young voted along to approve that as well. And so we're very grateful. I'm very grateful you took the time out of your Friday to meet with me, and I'm looking forward to your presentation, Catherine.
Elizabeth Patterson, and then founding member of the Good Neighbor Steering Committee, and then as mayor made sure that Valero actually did come up with the money, because there was a bit of a hiccup with them and meeting their obligation. And so that's kind of was my role. And now I'm happily retired, and my dog is in the car. And I'm here because this is an amazing accomplishment, starting with all of the people that are here today. And we've traveled this road together in various capacities. And we're all just very thankful and grateful that they're being recognized by the Air District.
Hard act to follow. Nancy? So I'm Nancy Rund, and I'm part of the B Camp board, and also a member of the GNSC, which is Good Neighbor Steering Committee. So we're talking about, capital letters, but that's who we are.
Marilyn Bardet, and I'm also a founding member of the Good Neighbor Steering Committee that got going in 1999, actually, just as Valero was about to purchase the refinery from ExxonMobil. So we've been at this with persistence, patience, and persuasion, as I say, to finally get air monitoring in our community that's independent of the refinery, which gives us, we didn't even know how many advantages that could give us, but we are learning that from by working with Argos and with these Data Geek meetings that are now inviting community members from other surrounding communities, Vallejo, Martinez. We're opening it up so that all of us can learn more about the advantages of community air monitoring.
Yeah, we got you, Steve.
Ken Szutu from Citizen Air Monitoring Network in Vallejo. And also I'm currently the co-chair for Community Advisory Council. I feel really hopeful and good by being at that position because I see Air District is like turning towards community and they want us the community input. So and in the past I'm kind of outside and trying to fight and with the Air District. Now I'm kind of one foot indoor and one foot in the community. So I've been pushing the Air District because there are still tons of things we can do better within the Air District. But I also wanted to hear the community concern. So, and that's also one of the reasons I come over here today is even though I've been here in the past, but I also wanted to hear people talking from the community directly. So I know what's on their mind. So at the opportune time, at the CAC process, I can bring up those issues. And so that's me. Thank you.
And I'm with the Citizen Air Monitoring. I'm ambassador. This is the second time we're doing the ambassador program, so grateful to be here.
I'm Jimmy Sarmiento. I'm one of the founding members of Citizen Air Monitoring Network. I live in Glen Cove, not too far away. I have 2 grandkids at Robert Sample, so pollution from here is... Yeah, my daughter lives off of 2nd Street and the 2 kids go to Robert Sample Elementary School. Not too far from here.
Yeah.
So this is concerning to me.
My grandchildren live in that same neighborhood. So
I have to film.
Said before, this is a presentation we gave at the Air and Waste Management Conference in Raleigh, North Carolina last November. And it was really well received. A lot of people came up after and were like, that was great, including Kate Hogue, who was there, and Jerry Bovey also saw the presentation. So this is an overview. You guys are standing right, where we are, but just so you know, we are pretty close to the port, just right over there. We're close, obviously, to the railroad tracks, freeways. Valero is right over there. We're pretty close to their asphalt plant. So we are an ambient air monitoring station, not just focused solely on the refinery. And we're in a place where, we can we're around a lot of pollution sources here. As well as having 2 other refineries right across the straits and one right over there in Crockett Rodeo. So, this building, we were very lucky to be friends with Jack Russell. And when we were looking for an air monitoring station in the area, he said, well, we could use this building, which had been abandoned by AT&T. So it's a perfect place to monitor. It's yeah, it's really good. And one of the first, once we got our 501c3 status, we hired Argos Scientific as a contractor. It's very well respected, does monitoring throughout the world. And it's been really key. And as Marilyn said, Argos has gone above and beyond. We have a meeting literally once a week with Argos and have learned a tremendous amount about air monitoring. And now we have more and more people from Martinez, Rodeo,
Porter Ranch and San Fernando Valley.
Yeah, in the San Fernando Valley. So that is becoming a really good group. Jan Warren from the BackMed Coalition comes to that. So we'll go through a little bit later all this equipment. I'm going to have Dylan point it out because he's the most familiar with it. And then we are, as I mentioned before, we're a 501c3, so we can lobby regulatory bodies like the Air District, and I'll get into that a little bit more, but we cannot actually advocate for legislation, either locally or statewide. So we can't say vote for this or we support this bill. But no holds barred when it comes to the Air District. Okay, so as you can see, we're close to the railroad. The asphalt plant is right up there, close to the port. If we drive you down to the port, this is what it looks like as you're looking across the straits. This is Valero on not a great day, and you can see right over here, these are all homes.
Is that the 2017?
I'm not positive. I think I got
could
this
be-
from you, Marilyn.
Yeah, it could be 2017 or when the that's coming from the scrubber.
Yeah.
No,
And it's when the wind was blowing
not coming from the
towards,
scrubbers. That's not that day. Okay, that
towards
was another
Benicia
day.
rather than away. So our purposes are to independently operate an air monitoring station. So we're independent of the district, we're independent of the refinery. We have our own board of directors. So as I mentioned before, we monitor local ambient air quality, and we monitor it in real time. And we report the data collected, it's archived, and it's accessible, it's publicly accessible, which is really important. It's transparent.
And it's raw.
It's
raw data.
They'll provide raw data to people. We also are getting more and more into our educational mission, and we usually will once a year we'll have a big forum or whatever. But it's even more than that, because now we're working very actively with a lot of local activists throughout the refinery corridor to educate them about these issues also. So that takes on a whole different dimension, because now if I listen to somebody talk about air monitoring, I sort of know if they're full of BS. And sometimes they are. And then we have a public access website, which I'll show you a little bit later, and then I encourage everybody to go on to that, because it's a really good website that's very user-friendly, I think. These are the equipment. This is what we test for: benzene, toluene, xylene, sulfur dioxide, and we do that through open path UV monitors. We also test for hydrogen sulfide, black carbon, PM10, 2.1, and 0.1 through point monitors. We have an ozone point monitor system that actually is not here right now. It's over in, we have loaned it to people in Rodeo, because we're double checking. I'll talk to you a little bit more about this later. And and also very importantly, we have a wind speed meteorological met station.
Right there.
Yeah. So that is critical in identifying sources. So the equipment we used is commonly used by regulatory agencies. What do they call it, Eric? Federal reference?
Federal reference or federal equivalent methods?
Federal equivalent methods. So it's legitimate. And we operate it based on regulatory guidelines. There are monthly calibration checks that are performed using traceable gas standards, and so if you guys are interested in how all this works, I would suggest you talk to Eric or Dylan, because I can tell you a little bit, but they're the experts. And so we have legally defensible, credible data.
Real time.
Real time. So I'm going to turn this over. If you back up, this shows what all the different equipment we have. But Dylan, do you want to point it out to us?
Yeah. Happy to. All right, so like Kathy said, we monitor for particulates, gases, and also environmental factors like wind speed, temperature, humidity, and pressure. And all of those kind of paint a picture of the airspace around here. So Argos makes a proprietary instrument called UV Open Path Analyzer, which monitors for butane, toluene, ethylbenzene, xylene, and SO2. And it's open path. It has a light source over here. It's this blue box off the side of the building. It's aimed at a retroreflector down there about 100 feet away. So the light path makes a round trip, and it measures all of those molecules in the airspace there, and it reports that data live. So also in terms of monitoring gas concentrations, we have two air inlets just behind it on that vertical post there. One is for gas concentration. It's an air inlet for the Teledyne H2S analyzer, which is a model T101. It reads down to parts per million. Really great. Moving on to particulate monitoring, we have another air inlet on that vertical post next to the UV, which is hooked up to a McGee atherometer. They're a company out of Berkeley, California, and it's measuring black carbon, which is like city particulate. I think it's like a large PM, right? Moving on to one of the newer instruments is actually by a company out of London called Praxis. It's this cube, the antenna on the top here next to the camera. That is measuring PM 2.5, PM 10, and I believe PM 1. Actually, very small micron readings. Not only is that hooked to our logging system, but it's also hooked to the global network of Praxis's. So you can go on to Praxis's website and compare it to all the other ones that are out there in the wild. So also, like we said, we monitor the meteorological conditions. So we have a wind speed, wind direction sensor. It's an ultrasonic anemometer. Yeah.
Anemometer.
It's an anemometer. It's that one on the post there next to the UV. It's by RM Young. It's got a series of transducers that measure the wind speed and wind direction. So, which is great because we need to know where the air is going, which direction, how fast it's moving. That helps get an idea on the airspace, and when you combine that with sources, right, and movements, and sort of in the middle of the building there, you have this. It's called an E-BAM. We're actually not using that. That was the previous instrument, but attached to it, you see two sensors on the horizontal post that have radiation shields around them. One of that on the right there is a relative humidity and temperature sensor, which is very important because gases in the air react. They're reactive. They can be changing state, they can be expanding, so that affects the concentration of gases in the airspace as well. And in the middle there, you have a barometer, which is atmospheric pressure. Again, that helps with the meteorological data. So that's kind of the long and short of it. And let me know if you want any clarification, if I can help with that. Got it.
And this is inside?
Yeah. Of course, inside we have the instrument processing and servers and a computer rack there.
And we'll be able to. People can poke their heads in, but there is a delicate piece of equipment sort of by the door.
Yeah. So what she's referring to is that we have a new TDL, one of the newest instruments in our arsenal of sensors for air monitoring, which is H2S Open Path Analyzer. It's not currently hooked up, but our short-term goal is to permanently install it on the roof here.
Whoa.
Yeah, weather enclosure, and collect data along a 200-meter path, at least. That's minimal.
So we can become a resource for the community here by providing this information. And I'm going to get into just like one thing we did not too long ago, where we were able to, sort of tell where an emission was coming from. With these different particulate matters, we can distinguish between wildlife smoke and other types of smoke. We can, if there's ever a big event here, we would be able to aid first responders in trying to locate or pinpoint a source. It's much more valuable if we do this in conjunction with a lot of other monitoring systems. Because BACMed is in the process of putting an air monitoring station more in the residential area in Benicia, we would like to work on a grant to get this kind of station throughout the refinery corridor. So, because sometimes your equipment's down, and then or the wind is not blowing this way, the wind is blowing in a different direction. So it's better to have stations throughout. So I'm just going to tell you a couple of things that we've done in the last year or so where we've been able to detect HS2 and the emission and validating a real-time fence line monitor. So this shows what the HS2 readings look like, and you can see
H2S, Kath?
H2S.
Yes.
Yeah. What did I say? Oh,
You said
HS2.
H2S. So they're set. So we have continuous monitoring. So that means when you look at this, you go, oh, well, here are some big releases here. What's going on with that? If you don't have a MET station and don't know what way the wind was blowing, it's much more difficult to identify sources. So because we have the historical data, we can go back and look at what the wind patterns were like at that time. So this is I can't quite read these anyway. One of these is a wind, and one of them is the H2S. And then we also looked at some of the refinery data, because the refinery has point source monitors. The bottom, I can't see it.
Yeah, so the bottom, the yellow graph on the bottom is called wind direction, and the top is the H2S.
So you can sort of see by looking at where the wind's coming from and what time, when the peak was, where was it? And then we looked at also the refinery point sensors, and we're able to determine, yes, indeed, this was coming from the refinery, and it was above sort of community action levels. So, we were able to show that. Now, I don't think this plume lasted too long, but it validated the fact that we were able to track it down and identify the source, which is really important, because ultimately with air monitoring, and this is what I don't think the refineries understand, the goal of an air monitoring system is to identify the source pollution and fix it. So it stops the pollution. And so if they, it just drives me crazy when they discount it. It's like, this is for your benefit, because you want to fix those leaks as early as possible so they don't cause additional problems, either in your plant, with your workers, or with the surrounding community. So second thing that we did was we knew that there was some stuff going on with the Phillips 66 monitors. And so specifically what was happening there was their ozone readings were 0. So they aren't necessarily required to monitor ozone, but ozone is like a reference.
Because it's ubiquitous, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're monitoring ozone and you're getting accurate ozone readings, then maybe you can say, okay, the rest of your monitoring is okay. There probably have not been ozone readings of 0 since, what would you say, Eric?
Dinosaurs ruled the earth.
Yeah, there's always ozone in the air. And I know you guys know about air pollution, and you know that especially in the summer, they go up in the afternoon. So you always have ozone. You can always see it going up during the later part of the day. And their monitors just were showing 0.
For days and days.
For months.
Yeah, months.
So what we did was we moved our ozone monitor over there. We moved it into somebody's backyard who lives near the fence line. It's a federal equivalent method ozone monitor, so we know that it knows what it's doing. We set up a website, and we compared the results. So this is what their monitor was showing. You can see down there, they have fence line monitors on 2 sides. You can see 0, 0, 0. They never, during the whole month of July, they never reported concentrations above 1 part per billion. This is what the BACMed monitor was showing. This is what our monitor showed. And this is what their monitor showed. So for me, this totally threw into question the accuracy of any of the monitoring that they're doing around there. And it's something the Air District needs to look into more. Go ahead, Eric.
If I might, the reason that the ozone measurement is key is the UV system that measures BTEX also measures ozone pretty effectively. And so if you're not measuring ozone, you're probably not measuring BTEX very well either. And so that was one of the key.
And BTEX is the collection of the really nasty ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Benzene,
toluene.
ethylbenzene.
Yeah.
And so you're measuring both ozone from the open path and the gas frac.
At the end.
Nice.
So this, to me, was a real eye-opener. You know, that nothing has happened with this. There hasn't been any, and I'll direct you. There's been no regulatory action about this. And they didn't do anything about it. And if they had even looked at it once during that whole time, they would have, anybody who knows anything about monitoring would say something is wrong here. But obviously, they're not looking at anything over there. So it really made me completely understand the value of an independent monitoring system that is not run by the refineries. Okay, so what has happened? What kind of community benefit do we give now? We do have a resource now we can trust. We are working much more closely with BACMed now from a very standpoint of a lot of knowledge. We're starting to try to have monthly meetings with the staff. We are working actively with other EJ communities because Benicia is not an environmental justice community, so we can't get a lot of grant funding. But Martinez, Crockett, Rodeo, Richmond are, and we are working actively with people in those communities now. We want to apply for some big grants to do sort of this refinery corridor independent monitoring. And down at the bottom where you talk about we have had a ripple effect. Some people from Healthy Martinez are coming to our meetings now. They're very interested in this. So we're getting a lot more people involved and giving them sort of the technical know-how and the technical knowledge to, I think, be much more effective advocates. So that's been really exciting, and that is just starting to mushroom, I think. A couple of other things we do. Constance and I have both been with Air Watch Bay Area, which is now Refinery Watch, a nationwide group. Because our data is public, Smell My City, who does alerts, can tap into our data, and now if you want to, you can sign up for an email alert anytime we rise above one of the health standards. OEHA standards, I think most of them are.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, can I interject on that point?
Go ahead.
Recently, there was all about a different rule. I mean, we've been engaged with Reg 12, Rule 15 about air monitoring and fence line monitoring at refineries. But there's another very important rule. It's Rule 18.3 or whatever it is. But it has to do with health risk assessments. And I couldn't go to the meeting, but I
went to part of it.
I went to the link to see how 33 listed industries in California stack up in a phase 1 analysis of degree of risk associated to these facilities. Valero, our refinery, I should say, because it was previously Exxon, has been considered a phase 1 industry with an elevated cancer risk for the community for years. And guess what? The last health risk assessment that was done for this community was in 1991 when ExxonMobil was still here. We went through the sale of the refinery to Valero, a 10-year upgrade to the refinery to process more sour crudes and as part of their crude slate. And we have 2 refineries in this town. No one can tell me the asphalt plant isn't a refinery because that's what the California Energy Commission says it is. It's a small refinery processing permitted up to 18,000 barrels BP barrels per day processing crude oil. So we have 2 refineries here. We're not an EJ community, but we're surrounded by refineries. We have 2 of our own, and we haven't had a health risk assessment since 1991. That has to be addressed.
And I will maybe talk to you a little bit later about. I went to the meeting last night, and I am very disturbed by it. Anyway, but we have open data, so people can tap into it, and they can get the raw data. And we do have this is why we can have like Smell My City. Use this to send out community alerts.
Kathy, just a quick insert. That's Carnegie Mellon University that's put that together. It's a nationwide thing. And we have APIs, open data. And that's what we're always requesting of EPA, Air District, et cetera.
Everything, open data. And Dr. Ottinger and some of her graduate students at Drexel University have used our data for research and to compile like a toxic soup analysis.
Right.
So that, go ahead, David.
Well, I don't know, maybe we already talked about this. I think not only having the data available, but having a partner like Argos that helps us in terms of pay attention to the data and help analyze it. So especially, coupled with, even though we're just like one point here in the whole, area, you can look at the meteorological data, the wind direction and speed, and then they've looked at like, well, we have an elevated, I don't remember if it's H2S or P10 or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can say, well, look, it's likely.
Yeah.
We likely know where the source.
Yeah,
is.
I did talk a little bit about that. So, and the data quality is high enough, so it should be considered actionable. And you don't need to go through a public information request. You can just say, hey, I'd like to tap into this network, and you can get that information. So here's our fence line. Again, real-time data. You can go back historically. We have a lot of links on there to report air quality issues and reference links. I'm going to talk a little bit about the future, and then I'm going to talk just a little bit about how we got here. This is when I did the presentation, it was like, okay, what's my time? When am I going to...
And then I can also I can fill in the stuff that was going on within the city government.
Right there. So we want to do more advocacy, broader advocacy. As I mentioned before, we really want to get more EJ communities having their own independent air monitors. We've also become a test site for new equipment. So we have the new H2S. We also are looking at having an optical tent system installed here as a test site that Johann Stutz down at UCLA has worked on. We'd like to have independent monitors all along the refineries, and we'd like to actually work more closely with the refineries. So we'll see how that happens. Yeah. But and we want to work in more EJ communities. And I think even though we're not an EJ community, a lot of this advocacy work we do is benefiting those communities because we all live by these refineries. So if we can go in and advocate for changes, like, we have sent in long letters saying this is really what we'd like to see in some of these rules, open data history, something that, as Constance says, has an API that people can just tap into. I'll bring this, we might just want to look at, this is a picture of our website, but I just encourage everybody to go to it. It's super easy to read. Here we're showing Lori Wilson. This is another, their station opening. I think that might be Steve sitting there. So the Good Neighbor, in 2003, the Good Neighbor Steering Committee really ramped up a campaign to ensure air monitoring. And there was a settlement agreement reached between them and the Valero Refinery, which included air monitoring. And at first, the air monitoring was in this trailer that was in the Valero buffer zone. That settlement was for a substantial amount of money. And this is like the very end of the money that was agreed to there. So in 2008, there's a $14 million that went to the community, $250,000 for community air monitoring. And then after another series of negotiations for money that had not been spent.
Years later.
We reached an agreement with them to give us $460,000 for a community air monitoring
I think you
station.
should emphasize that The settlement was in 2003. You got some air monitoring on site. And then, not
They
until
took it away.
2008
Yes.
did we get the rest of the money, we being the Good Neighbor
the Good
Steering
Neighbor
Committee,
Steering
but that
Committee.
was because of the link with a land use permit from the city.
Right.
So that wasn't fair or honest or ethical.
But I do think that this sort of shows where, you know, really, I think the big polluters in an area should be funded with these stations. So this is just, anyway, I just had to contact us with questions, but you can just ask us questions. So,
Yeah, excellent.
any questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
I do have one question.
Yes.
So we're measuring all these emissions. Valero's measuring all the same emissions except for H2S.
Oh, they're monitoring for H2S.
Well, they're
Well,
not,
they aren't monitoring very well.
but it's not being reported, is it?
oh,
Yes,
yes.
it is.
Oh, okay.
It's just
Oh, yeah.
not trustworthy.
Okay.
It's required.
And so my question is, how does our data differ in any substantive way from the data that they're reporting? Are there any instances where we're showing something that they're not showing?
You know, it's a good question because it's not like we're showing data spikes all the time, you know, and when we did have the H2S spike, we did look at some of their, I don't think it showed up on any of their fence line systems, but it did show up on some of their point monitors. So a fence line system and an ambient air monitor have sort of different functions, really. And the fence line systems, because they're sort of lower to the ground, they're really designed for leaks.
Fugitive
Emissions.
Mm-hmm.
Where this is, we're monitoring everything. So if things are getting up and above the fence line, that's when we might pick it up a little bit more. And I'm very curious. I mean, I would hope that we maybe would have picked up some benzene when we were having all those benzene emissions for those years when they were just vastly exceeding the standards. But I don't know, Eric, you probably, I haven't seen a huge amount of difference because we're sort of doing different things with the...
It's true. We do see differences in the data, and with the fence line being fairly close, you would think that they would mirror pretty effectively. So you know there is some concern, I guess, that you know the systems that they have in place aren't measuring quite as well as what we would see here, because you would expect them to be a little bit higher concentrations right next to the fence line of the refined.
You know, the tolerance H2, on the H2S measurement, but we're getting close, and it's really vital that the instrument meets this minimum detection limit so that you can measure something that could be dangerous to the public. And I'm frustrated, especially as someone that used to work there, that they don't see that. And because it's really like if there was an issue where he had an H2S that would harm the public, they'd go out of business. If it was like a big event, they should be protecting their own self-interest this way. And that's why, that's partly I'm really frustrated with.
Well, I think I was at that same meeting, and I think if I remember correctly, the other comment they made was, "Oh, it's such tiny little amounts; it's not any health problem."
Right.
Maybe it's above the health thresholds, but it could be indicative of a much bigger problem. And as David said, it's diluted. So you don't know what the real amount coming over is.
Kath, I'd like to dovetail because you brought up about Valero and the CAP meetings, where when you have a public meeting once a year to hear from Valero, they kind of dismiss community questions even, and then try to maneuver around them as though to dismiss the importance of what's being said. But I was just at a CAP meeting on Tuesday, and Don Camillus, we talked about it at Data Geeks yesterday morning, and Don encouraged me to say what my experience was at the CAP meeting, and when we knew that you would be here, Mr. Regan. I have been, a Good Neighbor Steering Committee helped actually get the CAP to be formed by collecting signatures way back when to have a CAP. thinking that this could be beneficial to the community to have an exchange directly with Valero on a regular basis. But what's happened is it's gotten extremely unbalanced, is a kind word, but it became so contentious the other night. Two city council members who are trying to explain why they were in favor of and promoted at the city council a 5-member vote of the council to step forward and create an industrial safety ordinance for Benicia that would be a model or an ordinance, would add about health issues to do with emissions, auditing and whatnot. And the refinery, it was very clear. They do not want an industrial safety ordinance. And then they started talking politically. They really went over the top, to use Biden's language, attacking, I would say, our 2 city council members, and especially Carrie Birdseye, sorry. Carrie Birdseye, who was their comments were so directed at her that she had to leave the meeting, she felt. She did. And if I looked around, and I'm the only person who represents environmental interests, representing the Good Neighbors Steering Committee, sitting on the CAP, when I have identified that Kara Bateman's husband works for Valero. She's very intelligent about technical matters. She sits right next to
Dennis Lowry.
Dennis Lowry, who is absolutely pro Valero. Then they have the industrial park representative, a school district board member who is, or a CAP member who appears to be nonplussed by the idea of being critical at all of Valero. And then the woman sitting next to me, who's only been on the CAP, maybe she was appointed as a community at large member. She has worked 32 years at Chevron, and she raised the issue and said, I don't know why are we going down this pathway? Why are we bothering to chase after an industrial safety ordinance? This is a minority interest. And then Valero just chimes in and talks about the politics. We're a minority interest, and etc. This CAP is not serving the public interest. And the district should understand how this can go haywire. And when you and I have also been under attack at several of these meetings, and where Paul Adler goes ballistic. He's their PR. The PR person. He came from Rodeo. So I mean, it's very, very uncomfortable right now. Now that we're trying to get an ordinance in place that would serve Valero as what the intentions of the industrial safety ordinance of Contra Costa County, City of Richmond, San Luis Obispo. We're trying to at least borrow the best of, and where they go beyond Program 4 of state law. So I add this because you're here to carry that back to the district, that there is a problem with the CAP, and at least I can speak for that at Valero.
Yeah.